One thing I did not see coming, I admit, was the Jets season turning around off of a loss, like an inspirational loss. But when you look back a few weeks ago, that game against Kansas City could be the game we all look at and say, wow, it turned the whole season around. And what was it? It was a Sunday night game against a team that was clearly better than them, and a game they could have won if not for bad officiating. Mm-hmm. Does that sound familiar? Because just a couple days ago, the New York Giants, in a game in which they were even a bigger underdog than the Jets were, played a much better team, shockingly competed in it, and if it wasn't for a non-call at the end of the game, kind of the opposite of the Jet game, the Giants could have won. And instead, the Giants lost a heartbreaker to the Buffalo Bills. And I wonder, Tiki, is that the loss that turns the Giant season around?
Well, they played great defensively, as we know. They held Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills to no points through three quarters, which is something that rarely happens to that Josh Allen-led offense. And so optimistically, you'd say, man, if they play like this, they can beat anybody, which kind of was familiar to how they played last year, right? Didn't matter the opponent. They kept teams and they kept the score tight and gave themselves a chance to win it at the end of games. The difference, I think, from what the Jets showed after the Kansas City loss and what the Giants showed is that after the KC loss, the Jets were, I mean, it felt like they won because I had the game right after. I did the Denver game, and talking to Coach Saleh and to Zach and Hack and all those guys, it was like, man, did they just lose and they just win? Like, you couldn't tell. Like, they took the, and I hate the word, but it is what it is, the moral victory of the Kansas City Chiefs and how they played defensively and offensively and let it propel them. Whereas the Giants, and interestingly enough, I have them this week. It'll be interesting to see. Is it moral victory or is it anger? Because it felt like anger after the game. It didn't feel like, man, we played so much better than we had been. It felt more angry.
Is that the difference, though, between taking a loss like that and going on a run? Because there were a lot of positives you could take out of this game, starting defensively.
No doubt.
This was a defense that couldn't tackle for the first 5 weeks of the season. This was a defense that couldn't force a turnover. This is a defense that kind of changed the narrative about the way they were playing to start this season. So, yeah, as a fan, as a head coach, you're going to say a loss is a loss. That's how I felt after the Jet-Chief game. Mm-hmm. But to the Jets' credit, they turned it into a positive, and they've responded with a 2-game winning streak. Why can't that be the Giants?
Well, it better be the Giants because this is basically their last chance. We've said it almost every week for the last 3 weeks. The Giants have to win this game. They have to win this game. They have to win this game. But they really have to win this game coming up because if they go 1-6, then and if it looks bad again, you're starting to say, well, God, they can't go anywhere. They're not going to make the postseason this year. What's left of the roster after the trade deadline? You start looking towards next year if you start a season 1-6. Now, we know there's immediate past examples of that not actually being the case, with the Detroit Lions being who I'm talking about. They started 1-6 and then just were a game away from the playoffs. And by the way, they've carried that momentum into a 5-1 start into this season. So it's not always terminal, but man, it feels like it because of how bad they've played offensively and the fact they can't score. So I think the difference with the Jets and with the Giants coming off almost wins is that the Jets took that almost win and let it propel them, as I said. The Giants, that's still to be determined.
Well, what's crazy is, and I admit this, after that game against Kansas City, you're right, there were a lot of Jet fans who felt like it was a win. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of Jet fans walking around feeling good. I didn't. I remember saying to you, great, Zach Wilson had 4 good drives. Yeah. What the hell does it mean? And it didn't leave me with a lot of confidence going into Denver. Now, I'll admit this, and I have no problem admitting it. I raise my hand proudly and say, wow, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Because that loss clearly, and we have the vision now of 2 weeks to look back, helped turn this season around. So I'm just trying to be fair about what I witnessed Sunday night. Because here's what I saw, and here's what we all saw. We saw a defense that looked completely different than the unit of the first 5 weeks.
No doubt.
That's clear as day.
Yes.
That's number one. And that has to make you feel pretty good, especially going up against a flawed Washington team and Sam Howell, who's taken more sacks than anybody in the league. But here's even the second part with the offense, because they still didn't put the ball in the end zone. They still didn't score enough points. And obviously, we're going to remember the end of the first half, the end of regulation. But I'll give you two things. And I have no reason to just sit here and try to believe. I'm just being honest about what I saw. Saquon Barkley in the second half of this game, granted it only came from a handful of runs, but Saquon looked back.
Yes.
That's a part of the beauty of Saquon Barkley. Yeah, he'll have a couple of handoffs that lead to losses, mostly because of the offensive line's fault, but he's a home run hitter. And all he needs to do is hit a home run or two, and it changes the entire complexion of a game. So we saw Saquon Barkley look different in the second half. And to the Giants' credit, they got the ball in the hands a little bit more of Jalen Hyatt. So there were positives that you can look at from this game where you could at least rationalize, all right, against a flawed team like Washington, maybe it actually comes together and the Giants get sparked off an inspirational loss because that game against Buffalo, Tiki, would have been a far bigger upset than even the Jets beating Kansas City.
There is so much more to take out of that film. Like some of these Giant films over the last, first 5 weeks of the season, it was like, let's just watch it because we have to. There's nothing we could take out of it. This film, and some of it was intentional, right? Jalen Hyatt got more snaps than he normally has. They shortened the rotation, so to speak. Paris Campbell, I don't think, had an offensive snap at all. Sterling Shepard maybe had 3 or 4 offensive snaps. So it was shortened, right? They wanted to get Jalen Hyatt involved. They wanted to get Wan'Dale Robinson involved, their second-round pick from 2 years ago and a first-round pick from this past season. Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton was obviously the number one. And so they shortened the wide receiver group, and it felt like they had more of a rhythm, right? Darren Waller had a couple of catches, and it felt easier to get those guys involved because it wasn't a 6-guy rotation at the wide receiver unit. Crazy as it sounds, Justin Pugh, when he got forced to move the left guard or left tackle, they actually stabilized from a pass rusher, a pass pressure situation. So they're positives to take away. I think the biggest, though, is defense, right? Wink likes to be variable. Like, you have no idea what you're going to get from Wink Martindale. Well, you kind of knew this week because they didn't travel. The safeties, the corners just stayed on their sides. They played a lot of man, but they let the defensive line do their job, and it limited what Josh Allen was able to do. Maybe because it was unexpected, but I think it just allowed the guys to be free and just play and not have to think. Remember 2 weeks ago, it felt against Miami, it felt like the Giants secondary was running around having no idea what they were supposed to do. Literally, you'd see Okereke saying, no, you're supposed to be over here.
Despite the turnovers, it was still a dreadful performance.
Yes, exactly right.
Like their forced turnovers kept them in the game, that's great, but the rest of that performance was pathetic. You can't say that about what they did against Buffalo on Sunday night.
They looked like they knew what they were doing on every snap, and that's important. Now, does that propel you in a loss? I hope so. It propelled the Jets.
Well, and you know what's funny? Normally, because 2 weeks ago, I would never buy that you can turn your season around off a loss. Like the only loss that jumps out to any of us that propelled anything was the historical loss to the Patriots at the end of the 2007 season, Week 17. The moral victory loss at the end of the regular season that didn't mean anything. Outside of that, you have your moral victory losses. It usually leads to nothing. But because I just saw the Jets do it 2 weeks ago, it actually gives me a little bit of thought of, well, maybe the Giants could do it.
Yeah, but Coach Saleh let the Jets believe after that. And I know that a message to a team can be different than a message to a public, but Brian Daboll's dejectedness after the Bills game and his you don't get any no trophies for trying, I think personally was the wrong message. Now, it's the anti-Aaron Boone, and we kill Boone for acting like everything's rosy when it's not. So I don't know what the right threading of the needle is there, but this team needs a reason to believe right now, and it's hard to believe at 1-5. And if you wanted to feel good as a defense and think we played our ass off, no trophies for trying is what I get from my head coach. When the defense knows that the offense isn't scoring a lot of points, I think Brian Daboll missed a golden opportunity to make this team believe.
He also could have just been frustrated as hell.
He was.
We all were.
But I'm just saying. But given the opponent and Like, I don't know what the relationship is with him and McDermott.
Well, I do. They hate each other.
I mean, it was.
And the only reason I say that,
frosty.
yeah, is because we've all now seen the video. If you haven't, I'll describe it. After the game, Daboll and McDermott went to do their handshake, and they look like two guys who, were arguing about a woman they both hooked up with. Like, it looked bad. Like, it looks like they can't stand each other. Like, it's Dylan and Brandon after season 5 because they were fighting over Kelly. You know what I mean?
No, exactly.
Good analogy?
But it's perfect analogy.
Thanks.
But and so perhaps because they lost the game the way that they lost, with a chance to win with the ball in your hands. Not like you need something crazy to happen. You don't need a Hail Mary. You don't need a turnover, an interception. You don't need anything other than to get a yard.
I know.
Right? And it ends that way. And against a guy, an organization I'm sure you respect, but maybe a head coach you aren't on the same page with post leaving there a couple of years ago. I can understand why in the moment after the game he was just pissed.
Is that going to matter though? Like,
I don't know.
You think
you're not thinking about your messaging,
Wait,
like how you're delivering the message.
Okay.
You're just upset that you lost a game you could have and should have won.
No, and I agree with Brian Daboll. And I think if you're a Giant fan or you're a Jet fan off that game 2 weeks ago, my reaction is we lost. My reaction is this sucks, and we lost. Now, a few days can go by, and you could certainly take the positives out of it, and maybe it can lead to something good, as it clearly has with the Jets. But I don't think Brian Daboll, minutes after the game, saying there's no trophies for losing is necessarily going to mean they can't build something off of the good that they created 2 nights ago.
All right. Well, he met the media the next day. Yesterday morning, and it was a lot of more curmudgeon anger. I don't have any information on injury, and he's doing the Belichick thing, and I understand that.
Yeah.
And again, I want to reiterate, I'm pro Brian Daboll, but the message yesterday could have been, this has been a very trying season for these guys, and they went up to Buffalo versus one of the best in the league, and they competed their ass off for 60 minutes. Some things didn't go our way, but we're building some things here. A little message like that, I think, could go a long way.
Now, Tiki, as a player, are you really paying attention to what the coach says on a Monday morning?
Only if he's saying the same thing to you, right? Sometimes coaches, and I think Brian Daboll is this way. He says something to the media, or he says things a certain way to the media, but the message to the team is different, right? There's some coaches, it's whatever you see in the media, it's exactly what you got in the meeting room, because that's how Coach Fossil was.
Right.
Like he wore it on his shoulder. It just, you know who I am, you know what I'm you know how I feel. I'm saying it at the media. It's exactly how I'm going to say it to you guys in the meeting room. I don't know if Brian Daboll is that way. So I hope that Brian Daboll had a different emotion with his team. Like, this means something positive for us guys, right? We played so much better from snap to snap, offensively and defensively. Yes, we're still struggling. We didn't score. We didn't make the play when we need to, but this is significant progress. If that's the message to his team, then it'll transfer, it'll translate, and it'll carry forward into this weekend's game. But if it's not, if it's just negativity and negative reinforcement, there's a danger that you lose guys.
Yeah, it may be a recency bias in my mind, but witnessing the Jets having a game like 2 weeks ago and having it clearly be the game that helped turn their season around. Like, I always think about the highlight video if you win a championship. And that's not me predicting the Jets are winning a championship. It's just a fantasy I have about every team I watch every single year. Like, trust me, the Nets score an opening bucket against the Cavs a week from Wednesday, I'll be thinking about the championship highlight video. It's the way my brain works. So at a moment of enjoyment, I'm thinking to myself, you know what's going to be really profiled on that championship video? Losing to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I wonder if, because that happened only 2 weeks ago, I look at what the Giants pulled off Sunday night, because it really was stunning. I know a loss is a loss. It's the same in the standings. But nobody in their right mind thought the Giants would be inches away from beating the Buffalo Bills. They were getting 15.5 points in this game.
Yep.
Even Tiki Barber picked against the Giants.
Yeah, especially without Daniel Jones.
Even Loogie, who lives in the Giants' huckus, picked the Buffalo Bills laying all those points. Me and Sean were the only ones loyal. And so the fact that it happened, and they were this close to beating them, as I hold my two fingers close together, and the Jets just recently had a game that's propelled their season, I don't know. Like, my brain's thinking to myself, well, why the hell not? And you know what helps? Because I always have to be honest about this. What really helps is who they're about to play. Now, I'm not telling you Washington's a bad team, but they're a flawed team.
Yeah.
And Washington is not Dallas. And Washington is not San Francisco. And Washington is not Buffalo. Like, they're facing a team, and I think this was a phrase you used a few weeks ago, and maybe we've retired it because the Giants are off to a bad start, but a peer-tier team. A team that you're on the level with despite all the issues the Giants have injury-wise and how bad of a year they've had. So the timing is also perfect that the positives you take out of Sunday night, you're facing the right team to kind of turn it into something.
Well, you hope you are, because Washington played much better last week. They didn't have any turnovers. Sam Howell took 5 more sacks. Again, now he's leading the league at 34 sacks, and the offense has been a little bit disjointed because of that. But their defense has up front is good. Secondary-wise, Jack Del Rio, their DC, had a different type of plan. They benched their first-round cornerback, Emmanuel Ford from Mississippi State. They have a veteran 6-year guy that's playing now. So they don't do a lot, but they're sound, right? They looked so much more sound against the Atlanta Falcons last week and forced 3 turnovers from Desmond Ridder, who the week before had a 320-something yard day and led a comeback victory over the Houston Texans. So you're right. They're up and down, but in some ways they're exactly where the Giants are. Their record just happens to be better because they were able to steal some wins, including against Atlanta last weekend.
Yep.
So that's the difference. But I still feel like these teams are peer-tier. They feel like they're the same team. They have the same issues. They have the same inconsistencies. It's just that Washington has won a couple. The Giants have only won one.
We'll get a Daniel Jones update in a couple of minutes. Let's go to Sonny in Malvern. How you been, Sonny?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good.
What's up, dude?
Hey, Tiki. How are you, buddy?
All's good, Sonny.
Good. A couple of things. Listen, I know the players and especially the coaches will never, ever admit moral victory.
Yeah.
But you know, Tiki, you know this, man, as a player. You know the Giants feel great after that game. They went into that game 15.5-point underdogs, like you guys stated, with a backup quarterback, and they should have won that game, number one. Number two, in the big picture is unfortunate. Now, listen, I'm a huge Giants fan, huge. But the problem is, number one, all the injuries they have. Number two, the offensive line is still in shambles. They had a left tackle, and I give him a lot of credit. You know, he used to be an all-pro. They had a left tackle that was literally on the couch a couple of weeks ago eating pizza and drinking beers. And their defense has 5 sacks, guys. They gave up 11 sacks.
Yep.
Double that in one game. So they've got a lot of issues. I know, listen, they feel a lot better, you know, after that game. But, guys, this season, unfortunately, and I hate to admit this, is not going anywhere. I'm sorry.
Well, you know, but here's the way I look at it. I know there's a cliche Boomer says all the time. We're talking about one game. You can't put together a win streak without getting one. And I think we all agree, they lose Sunday. It's going to go back to something I brought up 2 weeks ago, which is selling guys off and just giving up on the year. You lose Sunday, there'll be no chance to turn the season around because it's smart business to start getting rid of guys.
Yeah.
You win Sunday, no one's proclaiming the Giants are about to go on a postseason run or an 8-game winning streak, but the season all of a sudden looks just a little bit different.
Yeah.
And it's got a chance to be salvaged. It has a chance to make Christmas Day in Philadelphia, where Tiki Barber and Sean Morash and Tommy Lugauer are sitting side by side. You have a chance to make that relevant.
We caveated that, did we not? The
To
game's
what?
got to mean something.
No.
Yeah, it does.
No,
it does.
we haven't.
Although, as it sits right now, I kind of think we're going to win that game. But that's neither here nor there.
Look at your confidence. We'll come right back with more of your calls. We'll get to the Jets coming up, including Aaron Rodgers' possible return. And Tiki Barber may be making a return to football.